we are going to create watercolor cactus paintings while also learning some watercolor techniques. There are a lot of different cacti species. The definition for a cactus or cacti is a succulent plant with a thick, fleshy stem that typically bears spines, lacks leaves, and has brilliantly colored flowers. Cacti are native to arid regions of the world, and some examples of places they grow naturally are places like Mexico, Texas, parts of South America, even southwestern USA, and the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is the world's driest place. And of course, they can also be cultivated in many other places, especially as houseplants. Finding images of these interesting plants is easy, and once you have some great resources, it's time to get out your watercolor paint set and watercolor brushes. Before painting, I always suggest mixing out some of your paint combinations so you can see the range of colors your paint set can give. Creating a test sheet of mixed colors can help with your overall color composition in your piece. It's always good to practice painting a few cacti on smaller watercolor paper to get used to your color palette and try out different color mixes and backgrounds. I always have my resources close by, and I test out those pictures with the different drawings that I've done. Okay, let's talk about some of the different watercolor techniques that we can use when painting our cactus plants. The first technique is called the plastic wrap technique, which means to use cellophane or a plastic wrap that has been slightly crunched up and it's laid on top of a freshly painted part of your painting. You have to make sure though to lay it on wet paint and let it dry completely before removing it for this technique to look its best. And when done right, you can get a wonderful texturing on the surface of your work. Another technique you can use is called the salt technique, which is where you place sea salt on the surface of anywhere that has been freshly painted. The salt absorbs the wet moisture of paint and leaves different textures on the surface when it is completely dry. It is really important though to not remove the salt until that full drying process has happened. The next technique is called the wet on wet watercolor technique. This is a technique that uses wet paint against wet paint or wet paper. It is used to create beautiful bleeds and blooms between areas of color and allows the watercolor paint to spread and blend. As you can see here, I'm adding wet orange paint on top of a wet pinkish red color to see what those colors mixed together will do. As you add your color, you can add wet drops of water and other colors to see what those blooms will make. Another really important watercolor technique is called the glazing technique. This technique is all about building up depth by layering diluted watercolor and letting the layers completely dry between each application. You can see I'm creating this now within my piece, and I'm adding different areas of paint after it's been dry and creating sort of a shadow underneath the petal-like leaf. Here you can see I've let the yellow on this cacti to dry completely, and now I'm adding a darker color on top as a second layer. As any second layer goes, it's always a good idea to start with your lightest paint color and then glaze by slowly adding darker valued paint colors on top. You can really glaze with any color, and you can even glaze with the same color as another layer to make some area of your paintings darker. Some really important techniques to know when using watercolor are different lifting techniques. These require a clean brush and clean water. It helps remove unwanted paint areas or helps lift areas for added texture or softening. Some people like using paper towel or tissues to lift out clouds in their backgrounds, for example. Here I am taking a clean brush with clean water and gently using the paintbrush bristles to remove the paint that went past my drawn lines. I have a paper towel in hand to dab out the areas I'm working on. You need to be careful though to not overwork the paper surface with this method, as there's no going back to fix paper that has been wrecked. You can also try a different method of lifting using a Q-tip. When you are working with wet paint on wet paint, sometimes you have an excess amount of water that you want to remove. You can use the Q-tip to remove some small areas, or even use it to try to absorb the paint for different textures. Sometimes I even use water droplets to get some effects with my paintings, but be careful not to add too much water. Okay, now it's time for you to have fun trying out all these techniques. And remember to continue adding details after you let each layer of paint dry. This is how you create a piece that has a lot of depth, texture, and detail. When all your cacti are completed and dry, you can now go in and create a soft background with hints of cactus that are in the distance. To do this, you will need to make your paint translucent by adding more water and softly adding paint in unique and in a non-unified manner. Dabbing in a little extra color here and there and placing that on top in different layers, softly adding color in the background, can really make it look like there's something happening in the distance. And even after my background is painted, I go back one last time to add extra glazing and details within my piece. These small touches really bring the piece together. And now it's finally time to add your final details using your small brush and paint pens. You can have fun with adding the spines and prickly parts of your cacti using any color of paint pens you want. Some spines on cacti are in star clusters and some have only 1 to 3. You can also add fun dots along the ribs of each cacti. Here you can see I've added different spines and dots with my paint pens, and I've used some fun colors to make those details really stand out. And here is my finished piece. I hope you had fun learning some new techniques while creating something beautiful. Thank you for watching.